Acolytes, recently I did a video on why 1D&D is wrong about putting subclasses at 3rd level. And boy, did you all have opinions, which is a good thing. I think that it was important for both sides of the field to be expressed. But there were a lot of points that were missed in that video that I will go over now. And for those of you who are new to this conversation, in a recent 1D&D playtest with the Cleric, it is proposed that all subclasses start at 3rd level instead of what they are now. 2 reasons were given for this change, the first one being multiclassing and keeping people from doing that too much, as well as being easier for newcomers where they don't have to think about subclasses until the 3rd level. Spoiler alert, I still think that this is a bad decision, so there will be a little bit bias coming from me. I'll address the multiclassing thing, but as far as being easy for newcomers in D&D, at the end of the video, I will just give you one simple fix that should render all of this unneeded and will ultimately give newcomers a great place to start, as well as the players who have been doing this for a while a reason to play at level 1 again. Jim Inkpen says the following: I think subclasses at 3rd level is probably good for the game. For me, it does 2 things. Lets people play as new adventurers trying to find their path. Level 1 will always be tough due to few HP, so giving subclasses at first won't change that. Now, hit points are another topic, but might as well just fix it while we're here, where other game systems, instead of rolling the hit die at the beginning to determine what your hit points are at, just take the max of that and you have a little bit boost, and there you go. They go on to say multiclassing isn't needed for flavor, and this will hopefully reduce the difference in power level between non-optimized characters. Now, this is where I will have to fully disagree. Multiclassing, in my opinion, is often really needed for flavor. There are certain abilities and concepts that you can't accomplish with certain features that you already have, and that's why you multiclass into other features to get them. In my last video, I used my Blood Hunter Phoenix Sorcerer multiclass as an example, and for me, as a Blood Hunter who wanted to cast fire magic, there was no way that I could reflavor the Blood Hunter in order to cast fire magic. So I needed to multiclass. Again, not doing it for optimization or metagame reasons, I just wanted a cool character concept. And the thing that we have to realize is that from what I've seen, or at least in the comments that I've had, reflavoring is a newer concept even for veteran players. So when new players want to come in, they want to be told how to play their character. They want to have it line by line. This is how your magic and your subclass works. So there have been arguments on just taking the base classes and then reflavoring those into the subclasses that you'll get at 3rd level, and sometimes that just doesn't fit. Now, Hive Insider has another comment about this multiclassing, and they say multiclassing is the side effect of having fewer vague, broad classes. If I want to play a character who belongs to an order of holy assassins, I'm not unlikely to mix Rogue and Cleric or Paladin together, and I'm then going to use the subclasses to give my character individual personality beyond their holy order, like say Order Domain and Soul Knife, to give them sort of a sharp theme and personality. 5e classes are too vague to give precise flavors really, which is why multiclassing is important. You can't really sum up a character's powers as fighter or sorcerer, etc., without being quite simplistic. Certain multiclass combos being overpowered is a balance problem, not a problem of multiclassing in the first place. And hey, straight class wizards and druids are still destroying mountains that even high optimized multiclasses can't deal with. And it's true. In my last video, I covered why they are doing this multiclassing thing, and the one reason that they give was Hexblade, the one multiclass that is really bothersome for a lot of DMs at the table because of its optimization reasons. Sanjay Merchant says this about the topic: I feel moving subclasses to level 3 is one of those things that technically fixes a problem, if you consider dips a problem, by just removing the context. The best analogy I can think of is treating an infection by amputating a limb. Yeah, the patient is no longer infected, but you didn't actually treat the problem directly. The reason Hexblade dips, let's face it, that's what they're talking about, happens so much isn't because Hexblade is a level 1 subclass per se, it's because the substitute charisma for strength dex feature was designed without giving any thought to multiclassing at all. Yeah, reducing madness is generally good, but when you make madness reduction a feature of a single class, it's going to heavily incentivize taking that class for however many levels it takes. And for those of you who don't know, madness, or mad, means multi-ability score dependent. So things like strength, dex, constitution, wisdom, charisma, intelligence, you need to depend on multiple abilities in order to be effective as a character. But the point here stands. If we're going to go in and fix multiclassing, We really just need to fix the things that cause multiclassing to be an issue, instead of gutting the entire system in order to do so. Matthew Rosebrock also hit on this topic. Couldn't we just look at how some cheesy multiclass combos work and rework the rephrasing to mitigate or undo them? I mean, one D&D UA for the Cleric did that already by altering the phrasing of the Life's Domain Cleric's Disciple of Life feature, in which the additional hit points are gained only when the spell is cast, not after, which prevents the 40 HP heal from a level 1 Goodberry spell. So again, for those who don't know what they're talking about, it's a popular multiclass of a Cleric into Druid, where it makes level 1 healing super good. But they fix that by just making a few words different, instead of having to gut the entire system again. And if you really think about it, Wizards of the Coast, if they really wanted multiclassing to be not a thing, if they wanted to fix the multiclassing dips that they were even specifically doing in Cleric, they probably wouldn't have done the things that they did, highlighted in Treant Monk's video, where he deep dived into number 1 or level 1 Cleric multiclasses with the new Unearthed Arcana that was presented. Treant Monk describes how getting a level 1 dip in the Cleric now with their Divine Spark feature gives you an exorbitant more amount of healing power than the Disciple of Life feature in the Life Domain Cleric does now. With Divine Spark, you would be essentially healing someone full health at every level from 1 to level 20, while trying to accomplish the same amount of healing with the Life Domain subclass in 5e, you would have to do 54 castings of Cure Wounds. You should definitely check out his video if you want to get the full story or the full breakdown of the two compared. But also a note, if they're really trying to discourage multiclassing, we should look at what they're doing with level 18 features now in bringing level 20 features down to that level. So instead of getting their capstone at level 20, they would get it at level 18, which is a 2-level bumper where would you do with that? You could still level up those two in the same class and get an epic boon, which, let's be honest, is not great. They're not good. Nobody really, from what I've seen, wants those. But in reality, what I would see happening is that no one would take those extra 2 levels and they would multiclass somewhere. But again, that's only 2 levels. So with subclasses being at 3rd level, we wouldn't be able to multiclass into anything and get the features that we might want in a subclass if we did it that way. But let's give this topic a rest for a second and move on to our next commenter. With Dream Reaver, they commented, I agree. Most players know what subclasses they want to play when they first make their character, but that's for players that have played at least once. We actually have a new player in our group and they described to our DM what kind of character they're wanting to play, and the DM told them what subclasses is closest to what they wanted. And really, that's the simplicity of it. I argue in my last video that most people that come to the table usually have a character concept in mind, even newbies. And what's complicated is giving them all the plethora of options that we have as classes, as subclasses, as all the features that are available. And yeah, looking at the 50 plus subclasses all at once, it would be very overwhelming for newcomers. But instead, it's as simple as asking them what their favorite fantasy archetypes are, what they kind of envision them playing at the table, and then providing them with the one subclass that would be able to fit that fantasy. You would ask them, okay, what kind of character are you going to play or wanting to play, or what kind of movies or fantasy the characters do you like? And they might respond, oh, I really like Jedi and I would love to play a Jedi-like character. And you're like, great, let me pick out the Psy Warrior Fighter and give you that. No choice necessary, and the person is already playing the thing that they envisioned. Instead of having to play levels 1 and 2, not being able to really feel like they are a Jedi until they finally get to their subclass. Another commenter, Abel Sampaio, I hope that I pronounce it correctly, the way that they made it, you still have some level of choice at the early levels that you can tie into your character. And level 1 and 2 are very nice for me as sort of training wheels for the characters. No one is their full realized self yet. The fighter has no maneuvers, the warlock has no boon, the ranger has no beast, and then they might be working on it, and it finally pays on level 3. Actually, to those who always start at level 3, this change won't change anything. For those who like the early levels, you get to experience the progression of your character to their subclass. That also makes multiclassing require more commitment. So in all, I think that is a good change. So first of all, I actually think that they make a great point that there is a certain fantasy of the character growth of obtaining a subclass or certain power level that you can play with. But then again, it's not everyone's fantasy and not everyone wants to be forced into that fantasy by playing 1 through 3. And while it does make multiclassing more of a commitment, it might make multiclassing too much of a commitment, because for any character concept where multiclassing is required, you have to take a full 6 levels in order to accomplish that idea. And with most games only going to level 10, that's more than half of your progression as a character, just to be able to get a concept across. And I might as well add here that when it comes to multiclassing and optimization, that's a whole level of play. It's a whole genre of playing D&D. And to me personally, I'm not an optimizer. I'm full flavor all the way. But to me, I would hate to see their way of play completely tarnished because we think it's too dangerous. Like, don't punish them for playing how they want to play. They're going to do it, so why not just allow them to? Julian Yoon says, yeah, my first thought when I heard this rule was the sorcerer issue. I'm a pretty new DM with new players, and there is admittedly a lot of explaining to do, but it would put my new sorcerer off the class in general if she couldn't even select her sorcerer's origin at level 1. People don't really play D&D for simplicity. They play for escapism, fantasy, etc. It should be up to the DM to help the player understand their subclass. Also, I plan on doing an early pilot session for my players to give them a taste for the campaign where I've set up a framework for things but haven't fully figured things out yet, where they can test their character builds, then we still have a chance to change things before launching into the campaign. And I think that's a great idea. It would put a lot of new players into the same position of more experienced ones when they actually start the game. I think a pilot session is brilliant. Do that. And here's the thing, we have to recognize that D&D as a game is just complicated by nature. We really can't change that. And I think that's 1, an expectation, and 2, an expectation that we should be setting for new players. I have 2 brand new players in my game that have never played D&D before and have only just recently heard of D&D. But it's interesting because even though they had no prior experience, when I told them the options that were available, like Cleric, Barbarian, Rogue, Ranger, things like that, they would continue asking me questions and be like, oh, can I do this? Ooh, can I do that? And they already had an idea of kind of the things that they thought would be cool. One wanted to be a siren character that wanted to manipulate and take control of other people's minds. Another one wanted to literally channel colors themselves, to take the prism and to unleash it into powerful attacks. Those things you really can't get in a base class. And instead of telling them no, they have to play a different way of play for the first few levels before they actually get to the things that they thought would be really, really cool, potentially putting them off of D&D, I absolutely said yes and gave them the one subclass, not a choice, the one subclass that would fit that fantasy for them. And again, if multiple choices were the issue, with multiple choices being the hard thing for new players to do, then what are they doing with the new UA's Cleric? Hive Insider also said this perfectly. I find it a little silly as well when they present the movement of subclasses to level 3 as making it simpler for new players, but then codify level 1 feats and add on a new level 1 choice for clerics. I don't know if they actually believe in their own statement. And yeah, you're actually having one more choice now than you would have had before with the feats and the new cleric option. But here's the thing that we have to remember. D&D is a game of choice. Every game we're using choices. Every time we level up our character, we have choices. It is a choice game by the nature of being a role-playing game. Another commenter, Lay, said, fully agree. I'd rather see them make level 1 and 2 worth playing rather than ensure that every campaign starts a few levels in. In my opinion, the reason people want to start at level 3 isn't just the subclass, it's also just because that's when every class has gotten all of their basic features up and running. Compact that down to level 1 and then build that up from there. I understand the problem of multiclassing dips that they're trying to avoid, but it's not the ideal situation in my opinion. Wizards of the Coast is trying to put in an introduction or tutorial levels for new players. And while I get that that seems like a really good thing, what happens when we play tutorial levels in our own video games? They're usually played once, if at all, and then never revisited again. And that's the issue they're describing, is that a lot of older D&D players or D&D players that have played a couple times never want to revisit that first and second level. They always want to skip to the third where they already have their character concept in mind. So again, at the end of the video, I will tell you how to make this all just plain and simple easy for all parties, but we'll get there. I think the changes are workable thematically, even for warlocks, sorcerers, and clerics. That being said, I don't like the change. Role-playing certain concepts at low level is going to be very hard. It feels that they're treating players like babies who can't look at 5 to 6 options and pick one that seems really cool. Anecdotally, when I was a new player, I was able to start with an Abjuration Wizard and play it through to level 5. Whether it was a spellcasting or a subclass, it just wasn't that hard. I guess if you really sat down, made your character with a quick build, and started playing like within an hour, never having touched D&D beforehand, it would be confusing. Maybe that's how people are getting into the game, but in my experience, they're usually a session 0, where the DM talks to the new player through what kind of character they want and helps pick out classes and subclasses that meet that fantasy. And yes, while I get that it's easier for some and harder for others, we can't forget the DM's role in this. With the DM, they usually set forth expectations and describe how general abilities and things function in the game. And so as a new player, whether it be a class or a subclass, you should know by then how abilities work. And whether you have 2 abilities from a class or 2 abilities, 1 from a class and 1 from a subclass, the way that you use those abilities should be exactly the same. They're not learning 2 different systems from a class to a subclass, they're just learning what abilities they have, not where they're coming from necessarily. Joshua Smith says, I'm not a big fan of all subclasses being at level 3. Most of the games I play in start at 3rd because it doesn't make much sense without requiring unlocked missions or training time skips. And what I think this person is addressing is what a lot of comments are saying, is that the character arc progression from 1 to level 3 is an element of play, and that you roleplay in-game those stories of how that person gets to their subclass level. But if you have 6 players, that's 6 different missions or 6 different lines of story where you're accomplishing that for every character. And it would be hard for all of the players to do all of their missions at all the exact same time, so they would all level up to 3rd level at the same time. Character progression is different for a lot of different people, and I think that's why that they made it the way that they have now, where some classes start higher and some classes lower when it comes to subclasses. But that growth to achieving a power level of some sort can be any ability, not just a subclass ability. But I have a player now in a Spelljammer game that we're doing, playing a Swarmkeeper Ranger with little nanobots. And he got those nanobots in his backstory, where he came to the table of some things already happened. But in the case of 1D&D, if they brought that to me, I would say, no, you can't have that as a backstory. You have to play that in game. And so we would spend the first few levels trying to find that a contraption that would allow him to be a nanobot Swarmkeeper. And again, that's just one of 6 players that I would have to do that for. So there's the question, right? Where is that line drawn? Where is your backstory, and what does your backstory, or how does your backstory influence your character versus the leveling up process? I love what Jeffrey Perrin says. I think overall the original system is fine. If they were worried about players, I don't think stuff like the Cleric was too intimidating. You could literally tell them the names of the domains and they would have an idea of the thematic names that sounded most fun. A player would know if trickery sounded more fun than life right away. If they were worried about multiclassing, they could reorder when they get things. How about this? Level 1, spellcasting plus domain, but just the domain smells. Level 2, holy order plus 1 domain feature, like Disciple of Life. 3, channel divinity. Pretty good. I also like Lucas Snakesman comment, Wizards of the Coast, all classes will get their subclass at level 3. D&D players, okay, we'll just start at level 3 so that we can play the characters we actually want. Me, well, that just sounds like subclasses at level 1 with extra steps. And honestly, that's just how I feel. That's what all of this has kind of been about, really. In contrast, Austin Milne says, I never got the whole, it doesn't make sense that you're cleric, sorcerer, etc., and you don't get your powers right away at level 1. If level 1 is supposed to be at the bottom of you starting out, why would a god just hand out its magic to someone who hasn't shown true devotion to them yet? The same goes for warlocks. As for sorcerer, they are just now starting to learn to use and control the magic that is their being, and its true power may not show right away. But you're not really just starting out, right? You do still have a backstory, I assume. And if you really put the mechanics into play, you as a fighter, a level 1 fighter, is stronger than a soldier that has been training their whole life to be there. A soldier stat block only being a 1/2 challenge rating. So it doesn't make sense that you're just starting out and yet you're still stronger than a lot of people who have devoted their life to the military or government. They go on, as for people wanting to start at 3rd, yeah, more veteran players want to start there and skip the early game because it's true, but plenty of modules released by Wizards of the Coast have you start at 3, or the first few levels don't really have much to do with the overall plot of the story, i.e. Curse of Strahd's Death House, or all of Baldur's Gate in Descent to Avernus. And yes, Wizards of the Coast start a lot of their adventures actually at level 3 because the subclasses don't have a lot of plot or significance to the overall story. It's one thing to start with your subclasses at the beginning of an adventure and then play through the adventure, and then another thing to start at level 1, play through all of the getting your subclass adventures, and then get to a single point where you start the next adventure where the actual adventure starts. They continue, for multiclassing, there really should be some commitment to get those cool subclass abilities. It takes time for someone who was a fighter to suddenly turn around and learn magic by being a wizard or such. You don't just pop into a store, buy a spell book, and learn how to cast a certain school better or something. And I agree, there should be some sort of commitment to another class. But here's the thing, a full level is a pretty good commitment. Raikura Kuzami says, I started watching your videos because of your reflavoring tips, and in building my character, I noticed how I can't do everything I want through reflavoring alone. It did irk me that some things I wanted were locked behind a 3rd level subclass feature. I'm in a campaign now, delaying my main class just to go through the motions and reach a simple subclass feature and carry on with my main class. I expressed annoyance about this, but ultimately didn't push too much against it, thinking it would be OP. What you're saying here makes a lot of sense, and I definitely agree, though I might be biased. Curious to see others' opinions, as I know nothing about balancing and game design mechanics and the like. And this is what I worry a lot of people would feel when they do multiclassing. And instead of just giving the 1 level dip and 1 level sacrifice, they're instead of sacrificing a lot of levels. And alternatively to them not giving up enough to multiclass, here they're feeling like they're giving too much, and that they are wasting levels in order to get to what they want. And obviously I don't know what feature this commenter is ultimately going to get, and I do recognize that you shouldn't get a level 20 feature at level 5 just because you want it. But again, it's like taking prerequisites in a college course just to get to the place that you want to get, but ultimately have nothing to do with the major that you're majoring in. Vector Spark says, this is honestly an extremely out of touch approach to class design, and it needs to be nipped in the bud now. Subclasses at level 1. Full stop. Multiclassing should not be gatekept just because power gamers are going to min-max character builds. They're going to do that anyway. Don't punish the power gamers because that leads to collateral damage and crossfire. Instead, accommodate the role players and let the community police itself. We've been doing that for years without you, and frankly, don't like that you feel that you can't trust us. I think it's a good comment, just saying, hey, don't be our police, just make a good game. Ultimately, I did do a poll on my community tab in my channel. And again, the results are kind of all over the place. Everyone kind of has their own opinion of what's going on with the 3rd level, 1st level, or however you want your subclasses to be. Again, I'm not saying that my word is law and my opinion is what everyone's opinion should be. I just want to make my case. And ultimately, whatever you decide, I hope that you go into the Unearthed Arcana playtest for 1D&D and give your feedback, so that ultimately we'll have the game that most people want and be able to play it how we want to play it. And I know that you've been patient and waited to the end for this one quick fix for all newcomers to make it super simple for all of them. So here it is. If you're really worried about newcomers coming in and thinking everything is complicated and being overwhelmed by all of the choices that they have, don't give them choices. Give them pre-generated characters. And that's it. That's all you really need. You don't need tutorial levels from 1 to level 3. You just need a pre-generated character so they can just see what's on the page and play with it. And ultimately, I don't think that pushing all the levels back to level 3 will be easier than that. Just give them a character sheet and let them learn how to play the game as they play. But thank you for listening to one D&D YouTuber's rant on the subject. And if I'm wrong, please tell me in the comments below. But in the meantime, go out there and spread the good word of D&D and make the world a better place, both on and off the table. See you in the next one.